You took the tech leadership job because you really wanted to build an amazing product, build systems, build an organization. What you find yourself doing is refereeing between those people who want to get the best week off in August. And all of a sudden, all your team is discontent and you're feeling like you're essentially a kindergarten teacher. A week passes by and again, you have to make peace between those two people who keep bickering for the third time this month. Or maybe you find yourself having to take care of people's bruised egos, and you look around and you ask yourself, is this what I signed up for? Definitely not. You're not sure why you're doing what you're doing. You probably are not liking it, you're not enjoying it, and you're thinking back maybe to the old days, the good old days where you were just you and your code and that's that. By the way, that's gone. Now it's you and an agent. But you're thinking about how things used to be and you're like, did I make the right choice? Does it have to be like that? And the answer is no, it doesn't have to be like that. You can continue stewing in whatever brew you've created, or you can start turning things around. In this video, we're going to cover exactly that. By the way, if you're new here, hi, I'm Aviv Ben-Yosef. I'm a tech executive, coach, and consultant, and I help people just like you turn their R&D organization from the company's biggest expense to its biggest advantage. So the first thing that you need to understand is that this is not a hurdle that's preventing you from doing the job. This is actually the job, or a big part of it. Leading the organization and creating an organization where the culture is healthy enough so that the people problem, in air quotes, are not something that's holding back the organization is actually the role. That's what you're there to do. And it doesn't have to be that bad if you're accepting it, realizing it, and doing something actively in order to make things better, as opposed to just sitting there and asking yourselves, how did we end up in this position? Stop whining. First of all, it's not really helpful. If you need to vent off, find a support group, find a coach, and okay, get things off your chest. But you and I both know that once you've finished this venting, nothing in the world has actually changed. Maybe you're just, a bit more dry in the throat, but that's about it. In order to actually move things forward, you have to take responsibility over it and start working on how you're going to be creating something else, how you're going to be upgrading your organization. Yes, people are not as simple of a system like code is, and it's not all clear cut. You find that things are way less deterministic, even when we put LLMs into the mix, and yet it is a system. You can take action in order to make things better, in order to be more in control, and in order to improve things gradually. I'm not saying you're going to be 100% better 5 minutes after you finish watching this video, but with proper, deliberate practice, with mindful and intentional work, you can make a big difference, and I've seen it repeatedly. So, would you rather keep complaining or do something about it? This video is for the latter. I want to keep this as practical as possible so you can choose something actionable to do based on the few suggestions I'm going to be making in the next few minutes. And therefore, what I ended up doing in order to make sure that this is practical is I reviewed my notes. I have a different video about my obsessive note-taking. I will try to link to it somewhere here on screen. But the bottom line is I reviewed the notes from the past quarter or so, and I took stock of all the different scenarios where I saw tech leaders dealing with a similar situation and what we did that actually got them to see some improvement. I'm going to be listing these very simple things to do when you can keep in mind that all of these are things that I have seen work in the past quarter or so, and therefore that's the time frame. I'm not talking about a change that's going to take you years, but also not something that you should expect to do magic within a week. Choose one, maybe two if you have more bandwidth. Awesome, good on you, do that and stick with it. And you'll see that within a few weeks you will start seeing a real tangible difference. Number one, if you're stuck in the kindergarten loop is to solve it once. It's way easier to make a hard decision once as opposed to tackling a somewhat simpler decision but 1,000 times. It's hard, for example, when we're talking about paid time off, to keep telling people that no, not this time, or can you make it shorter, or next week, or whatever, as opposed to creating one policy. This is what solving it once means. If you see people coming to you repeatedly about things like moving teams, about pay raises, about promotions, titles, whatever, if you keep battling this, think, how can I solve this once? As opposed to always being on the lookout for the next time that something like this pops. You can make it much easier. That's what policies were meant for. And I know that many people in Startup Land get the itches when you start talking about things like policies. But hear me out, I'm not talking about some, 30-page document, etc. And we both know that even if I were, you would just ask Claude to go over it and no one would read it anyway. That's not the point. The point is to write down something very simple and very, very clear so you can just point at it and that's it. Something that, again, might be a tough decision once when you're introducing it with the team once. But once you do, that becomes the norm. And also, it makes your own cognitive load that much lower because you don't have to keep answering and processing and contemplating about that specific problem again and again. You have guidance. You know what should be your course of operation, probably in 90 to 99% of the cases. That means that the overwhelming majority of cases will be simple and straightforward, and you will only have to see whether something justifies an escalation or deciding to do something differently this time as an exception. That's about it. These should be very rare if you have a good and simple policy. It means that the vast majority of cases is very simple and you have just eliminated a whole set of problems. You no longer have to address them. Number 2, deliver the message better. A lot of the times when it comes to the kindergarten sort of problems, like the two people bickering again and again, we seem to be walking on eggshells. We are not providing the feedback clearly enough. And because of that, people don't even register that this is an issue or don't understand the gravity of the matter. And this is usually traceable to a tendency that many tech people have, which is to avoid confrontation, to say things in ways that are not too harmful, too direct. And I understand that. I am the same. And yet, when we do that, often what we end up doing is extending the period of time where we have this issue because the other party did not register that there is really a problem. When you provide someone feedback, you have to imagine that you're using a very lousy compiler, like something very noisy. Your message is going to be obfuscated before it reaches the other person. A lot of the times, that's the case when we're providing feedback that they don't want to hear. Why? Maybe because their ego is protecting them. Maybe because they're actually so anxious that even when you say that something is, problematic, but it's not that big of a deal, for them, it immediately becomes amplified 100 times because they're anxious. Maybe when you told them the problem is X, they immediately look at Y because they have already thought about Y being an issue and they just project the problem there. All of these things happen when we communicate one with another. We're not communicating with a computer and therefore things are much harder. So when you're providing feedback, I want you to always keep in mind whether you're not sugarcoating it too much, whether the other person is understanding the gravity of the matter. And I always, in order to encourage you to find it, I say that you want to end these feedback meetings with something very basic. What's your expectation for whatever, next week, the next hour? I don't know, what are you expecting to see change so they understand what's the action item, the metric of success for this conversation, for this piece of feedback. And you want to ask them to rephrase back to you what the matter is. A lot of the times when we do this extra step, even if it feels odd at first, what you hear back allows you to understand, wait a second, right there, hold it, that's not what I meant. Or you see that they're taking it down a notch or taking it up a notch, and you can say, no, I didn't mean it that harshly. Or I don't think that you understood how much of a problem this is. So let me reiterate. When we do this, all of a sudden we're focusing on the communication, and that means that you will be playing kindergarten teacher way less often, because when you handle something, when you eventually take the time to handle it, you are much more likely to see that the message was received, and therefore then later we have less going back and forth from they didn't really understand me, they need some more time, etc. And you can very fast understand whether that person can improve or not, whether it's a fit or it isn't. We're gonna touch that in a second. Number 3, no feedback hoarding. When we keep to ourselves the feedback that we have for people, that's when we usually bruise their egos the most. Why? Because then something drops on them like a big ball way later. Their egos have started expanding and expanding and expanding. And when you get to the point where their egos are this big, then you eventually can no longer continue, and then you pop it. But that's going to be a very painful pop. If instead you provide feedback in a timely manner, you don't hoard it, you don't wait till things go past the point where you can no longer keep silent, then that pop is going to be, like a good, popping your back, and now you can feel like you can move better. That's what we're aiming for. That's what good feedback is about. That's what timely feedback allows. So don't keep things to yourselves. Don't wait till it becomes that big of a deal. Have regular ongoing feedback. I've got a different video about that as well when it comes to how we do impact coaching, how we provide people with the ability to get timely, regular, recurring feedback, because you've created this platform where you have these regular one-on-ones during which you tell people what the problem is. And usually, because we do it often enough, we're talking about issues that aren't that big, because during the week or two that pass between each one-on-one, usually nothing too big has the time to grow. So we're tackling little things and we're addressing them as fast as possible. Way easier and less intimidating than tackling the big things, and that means that a lot of the times egos don't get bruised as much. This also means that, for example, when someone is expecting or thinking that they're due for a promotion, that they can become managers, whatever, they're not gonna find out about it 6 months later when you're finally promoting Alice over them. But they're going to be regularly talking to you about what they're expecting, and therefore getting that feedback on time. So maybe they can improve, and in 6 months' time, they can be in the running, or they can understand their standing and not have expectations for something that's not going to happen, start working on themselves, or decide about whatever they want to do, etc. Whatever they end up doing, it's much better than living in a dream. Number 4 is auditing your environment. What are you doing that's enabling this behavior? For example, if you or the managers in your organization have a tendency to swoop in and make things right and cover for things between people and, settle fights or be the hubs between people. So if two people are bickering, you're injected in there in the middle. If someone takes extra PTO, you swoop in and you work harder, whatever it is. Maybe you're doing things that are actually enabling the kindergarten culture. And that's something that you need to be mindful of, especially because as organizations grow, changing this becomes that much harder with each additional person and with each additional month that passes by. Changing this sort of culture just gets that much harder because it solidifies. It becomes the default for people, even if that's not what they were used to before. And also, it means that you yourself and the managers in your organization will find it that much harder to switch how they look at things. And therefore, the sooner that you start changing your own behaviors and noticing where you're enabling this sort of culture is crucial. Be mindful of it. Try to find where it's happening. I usually say that if you do a weekly checkup, weekly retro, whatever, that's a great time to think about your culture, review which fires you had to put out, and then ask yourselves, what did we do to even end up in that situation? To have the expectation that I will be called in there and help people in that thing. What did I do to make that the expectation in the company, and can I do things differently? And lastly, admit your mistakes. And I'm not talking about a mistake that you did on the job that happens, but I'm talking about having people in the organization who are clearly not a good fit. Earlier we talked about the misfits. If you give people the proper feedback and you don't hoard the feedback, but you give it to them on time and still things are not improving, maybe they are not the right match for your organization. That happens. It's much worse to continue banging your head on the wall trying to change someone who's not willing or cannot change to what you need than actually admitting it, realizing that that's the case, and deciding to part ways. Most often, what ends up happening is that these people will find themselves in a better position later, and your organization will certainly be better off. Yes, does it suck? It certainly does. It's never fun, but if that's the case, you owe it to them, you owe it to your team, and you owe it to yourself to own up that mistake and do something about it, and hopefully also learn from it for the future. Remember it so that in the next time that you have to decide about hiring someone or promoting something, harken back to whatever mistakes you made in the past so you're less likely to repeat them. Remember that you're not their parent, you're not their kindergarten teacher, you're not there to continuously hold their hand and make them go to their separate rooms when they're fighting. You're there to give them the right guardrails, give them the right environment so they can maximize their potentials, be the best professionals they can, learn, grow, improve, and deliver what the company needs them to deliver. That's what you're there for. That's what you signed up for. And if you're stuck of being the kindergarten teacher, you have to start with these tactics and you will see changes happening very fast. If you have any questions or comments, my email's in the video description. I'll be happy to hear. If you like this, please like and subscribe. It really helps. And I'll see you in the next video. Ciao.